Welcome to this class on fluid mechanics, where we continue our discussion on hydrostatics. In the last class, we had seen the relation minus grad P plus rho G is equal to rho A. Now, this relation was derived for a fluid where the fluid moved like a rigid body. That is, there was no relative motion among the fluid layers. So, in the case when the fluid moves like a rigid body, then the pressure distribution in the fluid is given by the above equation. Now, this equation, first of all here, if acceleration is equal to 0, then we get a situation what we call as statics, and we get the basic equation of fluid statics, which is minus grad P plus rho G is equal to 0. Now, as we explained, minus grad P, this is the force per unit volume acting on an element of fluid. Now, if the fluid element has a volume delta V, then the force due to pressure on this element will be equal to minus grad P times delta V. And this is valid if delta V is small. So, and basically the equation which we have is just a form of Newton's second law. Now, if we look at grad P gives us the direction and magnitude of maximum spatial rate of increase of scalar property P, and grad P is perpendicular to surface of constant pressure, because on a surface of constant pressure gradient of P will be 0. So grad P is perpendicular to surfaces of constant pressure. So in a static fluid, surfaces of constant pressure are perpendicular to G. That means they are horizontal because G is vertical, so surfaces of constant pressure will be horizontal. In case if fluid has a rigid body acceleration, rigid body may be type of acceleration A, then we have grad P is equal to rho times G minus A, and in this case surface of constant pressure is perpendicular to the direction given by G minus A. So physically we can get the direction of a surface of constant pressure. Now, before we move further, let us define a term called gauge pressure. And this definition comes because pressure is normally measured by a pressure gauge which measures the difference between the actual pressure, let us say in a flow or otherwise, and the atmospheric pressure. So therefore, gauge pressure, which we write as P gauge, or sometimes we use P GAGE, this is equal to P minus P atmospheric. Because what will happen is on the gauge, one side will be on the gauge, one side you have atmospheric pressure, on the other side we measure P. So the gauge reading corresponds to P minus P atmosphere. So this is called the gauge pressure, and as we will see, the gauge pressure will often be used to calculate forces on bodies. What will happen is, suppose we have a body surrounded by fluid where at most places pressure is equal to P atmosphere, and let us say P is equal to P1 at certain area A1 of the body. So let's take this body and we say on the body we have pressure is equal to P atmosphere all around, except let us say there's an area A1 where the pressure is equal to P1. So what we can do is we can write P1 is equal to P1 gauge plus P atmosphere. So now this pressure on this body can be divided into two parts. So one part will be P atmosphere all around acting on the body, and on the area A1 we have P gauge. Now this part P atmosphere all around will give net zero force on the body. I will leave you this as a thought exercise for you to show that P atmosphere all around gives a zero force. It's very easy to conceptualize this for a symmetric body, let us say a circle or a square. But this is valid for any shaped body, not just a symmetric body. And you may probably like to see or like to derive this expression as a homework. And so this was the first part. The second part is P gauge acting at A1, and this will be equal to P gauge times A1 in this direction, and so the net force on the body is equal to P gauge times A1 acting at A1. So that is how gauge pressure can help simplify things. Sometimes we also use a term P vacuum, and this is used if pressure is less than P ambient. So vacuum pressure, P vacuum, is nothing but negative of the gauge pressure. If gauge pressure is negative, then the absolute value of the gauge pressure is termed as P vacuum. So now let us look at what we call as the hydrostatic pressure distribution. And for hydrostatic pressure distribution, the equation is gradient of P is equal to rho G. Now let G be equal to minus Gk. So then if we write the scalar components of this equation, the scalar components give us partial P by partial X is equal to 0, partial P by partial Y is equal to 0, and partial P by partial Z is equal to minus rho G. And if rho and G are constant, then we get P is equal to minus rho GZ plus constant. Or we can get this as P minus P0 is equal to minus of rho GZ minus rho G Z0, where P is equal to P0 at Z is equal to Z0. Now Z points upwards. So what this means is, if we go up in a fluid, pressure decreases, and if we go vertically down in a fluid, pressure increases. Now we can write P2 minus P1 is equal to minus rho g times Z2 minus Z1. And if we divide everything by rho g, what we get is P2 by rho g minus P1 by rho g is equal to Z1 minus Z2. Now here the dimension of each term is that of length. And this P by rho g is referred to as the pressure head or pressure head. Now, if we look at hydrostatic pressure in gases, let's write the equation. We have dP by dz. Let's assume pressure is only changing with z direction, so dP by dz is equal to minus rho g, and we assume an ideal gas. So therefore P is equal to rho RT. So from here what we get is dP by dz is equal to minus P times G by RT. So we have replaced rho by P by RT, and this gives us integral dP by P is equal to minus G by RT times dz. Now P goes from P1 to P2 and Z goes from Z1 to Z2. So now if T is known as a function of Z, we can find the pressure distribution in the gas. So here obviously, because it is a gas, density is not constant, so P is equal to rho gz or minus rho gz does not work. Now a special case could be if we have an isothermal gas, so therefore the temperature T is equal to T0, and here we will get log of P2 upon P1 is equal to minus G upon RT0 times Z2 minus Z1, and we can get the expression for P2. P2 is equal to P1 exponential of minus G by RT0 times Z2 minus Z1 in this way. So this is how one can get the pressure distribution as a function of Z for an isothermal gas and in space. If temperature is known as a function of Z, then we can put it in this expression and get the integrate that to get the distribution of pressure as a function of Z. Now let us look at the simple case where we got P is equal to rho GD. So for example, let's say if this is what we call as the free surface where pressure is equal to P atmosphere, we look at a depth D below, then what we have is an equation called P is equal to rho GD, which follows, which means that the gauge pressure at depth D, and we are talking of depth D from free surface, this will be equal to rho of the fluid times G times D. So we have assumed that there is a fluid of density rho in all this space. Now, so what we see from here is that a change in elevation of the fluid implies a change in pressure. So this principle is used and to measure pressure differences. So, and this concept is called manometry. Now, before we look at manometry, let us consider we have a container in which we have mercury, glycerin, water, and oil. Let the pressure at the top be P0. Let this depth be D1. Density of oil be rho 0. Let this depth be D2. And let the density of water be rho W. This depth is D3. Density of glycerin is rho G. This depth is D4. And this is rho of Hg is the density of mercury. So now here, if this point is 1, this point is 2, this point is 3, and here at any level this point is 4, then P1, it should be very clear, will be equal to P0 plus rho oil G D1. P2 will be equal to P1 plus rho water G D2. P3 is equal to P2 plus rho glycerin G D3. And P4 is equal to P3 plus rho of mercury times G times D4. So here what we learn is that we have to move from layer to layer to find pressure, and we use P is equal to rho GD from the fluid just above, and D will be the depth from the surface of fluid just above the layer, and density will be density of this fluid. So this is how we move, and 2 points at the same depth, if they are in the same fluid, will have the same pressure. Okay. So as I said, this concept we use in manometry, and what we do is that we take a tube and fill it with a fluid of a different density, and basically we take, actually I should say, we take a U tube and fill it with a fluid of different density. Now if on the left hand the pressure is 1, on the right hand the pressure is 2, and they are not equal, then if this is the fluid of different density, so now if we mark these points as A and B, and let us say this is fluid 1 here, and this different fluid is fluid 2. Now these fluids should be distinctly visible from each other. Now if I apply manometry, what I will get is PA will be equal to P1 plus rho 1 G D1. Now from A I move to B. PB, let this distance be D2. So PB will be equal to PA minus rho 2 G D2. Now notice here, from A to B, it is the same fluid. If I look at a point A prime, which has the same height as A, then pressure at A is equal to pressure at A prime, because A and A prime are connected by the same fluid 2. As long as the density of that fluid is the same, the pressures will be equal. Now once I move to B, I can go from there to P2. So P2 will be equal to PB minus rho 1 G times, and this distance will be D1 minus D2. And eventually when you work out, what you will see is rho 1 G D1 minus D2 will go away, and what you will be left with will be only D2. So you can then work out the difference between P1 and P2 using equations like this. So let's draw a slightly more complex manometer to understand this principle. So here we have a manometer like this. And again, I'm just drawing it randomly with let us say this is some point A and this is point B. We want to find PA minus PB. So we fill this fluid with different temperatures. So now we fill up here. So let's call this point 1, this point 2. Let this be 3. These are all different fluids. And so what we do is this fluid here is fluid 1. Then we have a separate fluid here which I show by dot 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 here. And this is fluid whatever. So this is fluid 1. This is fluid 2. And then we have this is fluid 3. So now we can move. So what we'll have to do is, first we go from PA to P1, then we will go from P1 to P2, then from P2 to P3, and from P3 to PB. And we will use P at some point P1 is equal to PA plus rho 0 G D1 etc., where this is rho 0. So we'll use all these type of relations, and thus we will go by measuring these height differences. We can measure the pressure difference between A and B if we know the density of the fluid. And one particular way in which we use this is, suppose we have flow in a tube. Now, if this is location A and this is location B, A and B are two locations in this duct. Now to find PA minus PB, we can insert a manometer. So I connect A and B by a tube, and what we will have is, we will put a different fluid This is fluid 1 which is flowing in the duct. Now we take a manometer which has a different fluid 2. So this is fluid 2 and this is connected to A and B. So connect the tube at A and B. Now because of pressure difference, there will be a level difference of fluid 2. And if this distance is D, the distance between the two levels of the fluid 2, so then again now we can use manometry between A and B to find PA minus PB. Now one question you can ask is that the fluid is flowing from A to B. That means it is not static. So can we use the equation of fluid statics? So let's look at this picture again. The fluid 1 is flowing from A to B. So this is flowing here from A to B. Then the question which is being asked is, can we use manometry equations which are equations for static? And the answer for that is, we can do so because there is no flow in the manometer. In the manometer, the fluid is static. And actually when you just connect the tubes, you will find that there is a motion, there is some sort of an oscillatory motion of fluid 2. But eventually, once the flow becomes steady, as we'll see later, it settles down, we will see that the level becomes constant. So therefore, we can use manometry even though there is flow from A to B in the top part of the tube, but in the manometer, everything is static. So therefore, manometry can be used. Next, we move to the topic of forces on submerged surfaces. If a surface is submerged in a fluid, then the fluid pressure will exert a force on the surface. And this is what we would like to know, how to calculate this force. So for example, let us say we use this symbol for free surface, the grad symbol or the inverted triangle. And let us say there's a surface like this. So this thing which I have shown is a surface. Maybe it is connected like this from the straight part. I'm interested in this surface, AB. And let us say there is water or some fluid along this side. On the other side, this is exposed to atmosphere, and similarly at the top we have atmosphere. So now what we are trying to say is how much is the force exerted on AB due to water. And once again, in this problem you will see, if we want to find the net force on AB, then you will realize that because P atmosphere acts all around AB, it directly acts on right side or the outer edge of AB, and on the inner edge at any depth, pressure will be equal to P atmosphere plus rho GD. So therefore the net effect of P atmosphere will cancel, and net force will be just force due to the gauge pressure. So therefore the net force on surface AB which is there will be just due to the gauge pressure. So now if we have to find this force, what we realize is force in general, force is a vector. So in which direction does pressure force act? And the answer to that is it acts in the normal to the surface direction. So if this is my area, I choose an elemental area dA, choose elemental area dA, and if fluid is on this side, let's say on the left side, then the pressure force acts along normal to dA, and we sense the correct direction by the fluid. So therefore force will always act, the pressure force acts normal to the surface. This is what we should remember. Now there are, and the magnitude of the pressure force, this is the direction, the magnitude of the pressure force will be equal to rho GD, where D is equal to depth from the surface. And this magnitude is due to gauge pressure, and the total force, if in some application you don't have to subtract the force of atmosphere acting all around, this will be P atmosphere plus rho GD, and this will be acting normal to the surface. Now there are two types of surfaces. First, let us look at a planar surface. A planar surface means we have a surface which is not curved, so it could be a parallelogram, it can have any shape, it could be a circular shaped thing, or rectangle. So in the planar surface, the property will be that normal to the surface has the same direction at all points. And this is as opposed to a curved surface, So the surface, curved surface would be like a sphere or a surface of a cylinder. So it could be a surface like this, and here n direction changes with dA. So if this is dA, this is n. At this point n will be like this, and at this point it will be almost vertical. So on a curved surface, n changes with location. But on a planar surface, n is the same for all dA. So in that case, the force due to pressure on a planar surface can be added like a scalar, because at all points force will be in the same direction. So for example, let us look at a case of a planar surface, which is, so let's look at a case of a planar surface which is inclined in the fluid such that it makes an angle theta with the horizontal. That means it's at an angle. So this is the free surface, and we have this is the surface which we are talking of. So this surface, and if I look at the plan, the view of this surface from this angle, then this has some area A. Now in case if this is a rectangular surface, then this area A will be a rectangle. If this is a disk, area A will be a circle. We are looking at a general case where we have this like this. And what we have is that this surface makes an angle theta with the horizontal. So we want to find the total force on this area due to the hydrostatic pressure which is acting. Okay, so what we do is, let's take a point on the surface. We choose an elemental area dA. So if I look at this elemental area dA, this will be basically, this is the, let me show this with some color. So what I have is this area dA so this is the area dA which one considers. Now this area dA, I'll get back to the black color. The area dA is, we look at it from the free surface. Let's call this coordinate as zeta, and let the depth of this be h. So from here it is very clear that zeta is equal to h by sine theta. Zeta times sine theta is equal to h, where h is equal to depth of elemental area dA. So now dF the force due to pressure on this area will be equal to P0, which is the pressure on the surface, plus rho GH times dA. This is the force on elemental area A. And the total force F is equal to integral dF. So this will be equal to integral of P0 plus rho GH times dA. So this will be equal to P0 times A plus integral of rho G times H. H we know is equal to zeta sine theta dA, and this we can write it as plus rho G times sine theta integral zeta dA. And this zeta dA will be nothing but the zeta coordinate of the center of gravity of this planar area, because that is how we define the center of gravity. And zeta of center of gravity times sine theta will be nothing but height of center of gravity of this area. So therefore what we will have will be the force due to gauge pressure will be equal to rho G times height of center of gravity times sine theta times the area A. So this is zeta dA is zeta of center of gravity. Actually I should have multiplied this by area, because integral zeta dA gives us zeta of center of gravity multiplied by area. So I had missed this multiplied by area earlier, so please include this also. So what we get is, for a planar surface, the force due to gauge pressure will be equal to rho G times height of center of gravity or depth of center of gravity of the planar area times the planar area. And this is nothing but pressure at center of gravity multiplied by the area. So, for example, if we have a rectangular planar area of L by W dimension, W is the dimension perpendicular to the page. So this is the area, this total length is L, and if I look at this area in this dimension, then this is equal to L times W. So now what we have here is, if you work it out, the total force on the rectangular plate, this will be equal to force at the center of the plate, or sorry, pressure at the center of the plate multiplied by area. So this will be equal to pressure at L by 2 multiplied by L times W. And so this is how we can then calculate the pressure. Now another way I will, now this pressure, while the force is equal to pressure at center of gravity multiplied by area, but the point of application of this force is not at the center of gravity. Force is equal to pressure at center of gravity multiplied by area. But and where do we need the point of application of a force? We need this when we have to find moments of the force. So if we have to find moments about the pressure, then we can't say that the effective force will act at center of gravity. And let me just explain this to you. So for example, if we have this is the free surface. We have a surface like this, a rectangular surface, which is inclined. Let this depth be h1 and let the bottom depth be h2. Then the pressure at point A is equal to rho g times h1, and it acts perpendicular to AB. So this pressure I can write as rho g times h1. Now what is the pressure at point B? This will be equal to rho g times h2, and again it acts perpendicular to AB. This is a planar surface. So at surface B, we know the pressure will be equal to rho g times h2. And if I now draw the loading figure, so the loading due to pressure force has this figure, and this has the shape of a trapezium. Now what we can show is that net force is equal to the area of this loading curve, which is this trapezium, and it acts at centroid of not of AB but at the centroid of this trapezium. So we calculate the centroid of this trapezium, and that is where the net effective force will act. So this is how you can find where the net force acts. There's another simpler method to find moments of hydrostatic force, and this will work for both planar and curved surfaces. So for example, if this is your surface AB, I'll do both surfaces. This is AB, which is a planar surface, or let us say this is AB, which is a curved surface. Then what we can do is, if we have to find, this is the free surface here, we have to find the moments about point A of the hydrostatic force. So what we will do is, we take an elemental area dA. And this area dA is at a depth d from the free surface. Then clearly pressure will be equal to rho GD, the gauge pressure. DF will be equal to rho GD times dA. This is for the planar case. We write it as a scalar. For the curved case, this will be rho GD times dA in the normal direction. Next, we have to take moments of this elemental area about A. So in this planar case, if I take this as length L, if I take this length, the distance from A, the force is acting normal, this length is taken as L, then this dm will be nothing but df times L. In this case, what will happen is the force is acting like this. So what I'll have to do is take the perpendicular distance, let's call it as P. So in the curved case, it will become dm will be equal to rho g d dA multiplied by P, where P is the perpendicular distance. And then you integrate the moment, integrate with dA going from A to B, take the appropriate limits, so in this case you will have L going from A to B and the total length will be L. In this case again you have to take dA going from A to B. If it's a circular angle, then dA can be written as r d theta with appropriate limits of theta. And these can then be used and integrated to find the total moment. Okay. Now there's just one more small thing which we'll look in the next class on. We have some, for a curved surface, we have some special relations for horizontal and vertical forces, and we'll be able to find them straight away without integrations, and that is what we will see in the next class. Thank you very much.